Cool. Thanks everyone for coming. There's quite a lot of people in this room actually, so it's always it's always great to see. I was a bit nervous whether people are going to turn up, a bit of everyone or nobody. But thank you for coming. And just a little bit of introductions to begin with. So I'm Leon, technical lead within Jigsaw 24. Technically what that means is a few things. A bit of an evangelist for DevSecOps and annoy Bob with loads of crazy random ideas.
Definitely do that, yeah.
Can we do this? Yeah. Also quite heavily involved in technical solution design stuff, come from an engineering background, Jamf installations, Jamf training, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I'm Bob Bryden. I'm the DevSecOps architect. And I run a small team and we build out lots of solutions, which we're going to talk about today. And my experience is quite varied, which is good. So I've had a lot of experience with implementing Jamf. I worked for ITV, we had a big Jamf estate. I've worked for Apple and a couple of other places. So quite a varied background to bring to this.
Cool. Just got a little bit of a slide just on who are Jigsaw 24. I think it became a little bit of apparent that a lot of people in this room might know Jigsaw, but know Jigsaw historically as a bit of a hardware reseller. And obviously, if we're here to talk about hardware, it would be a very kind of short conversation. But really, to kind of add a little bit of context to what we are going to talk about. And Jigsaw in the past, managed service provider and professional services, and within those two teams and within an organization like Jigsaw, being very Apple-focused as it is, what we tend to find is that we had development type teams and DevSecOps type people within different departments and different parts of the organization, I would say, kind of whether creating scripted processes for customers or on customer sites, creating specific things for them. And we never really had a way to kind of control that almost, I guess, or have any sort of like official way of managing that and then managing that moving forwards. And really what kind of we've transitioned to in the past year and a bit, would you say, two years, since Bob joined and kind of created the team, is moving that whole development side and that Mac sort of development side to a core part of what we do. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is a lot of the solutions and services, solutions that we've come up with designed to, well, hopefully we think kind of provide some nice efficiency and get a lot more value out of people kind of using their Macs rather being a hindrance or anything like that, and add a lot of value. I mean, we're kind of really proud of what we've come up with, and obviously wanted to talk a little bit around what it takes to develop some of these solutions as well, to hopefully inspire a few people to look at things a little bit differently from a development perspective and say, actually, what are the capabilities if I branch out a little bit from the typical scripting sort of process which you tend to see on a day-to-day. Cool, we'll go next.
So what we've done is we spent a huge chunk of time trying to build out all of our services, and what we've come up with is ELA, who I'm almost positive we did convince some people it was a person that was joining the team at one point, which was good fun. I think Jack, maybe who's in the audience, thought it was a person for a while. There he is.
No, he convinced.
Oh, he convinced people.
Person.
Sorry. Yeah. And what this is a platform for us to build on. So obviously, as an MSP, we've lots of customers, we've lots of different tools and lots of different platforms to handle. And this was a way for us to try and make these tools useful to the business and to our customers. So we've got a slide here that kind of sums that up, and there's some screenshots of some of the tools on here too. So this was about trying to get us, to Liam's point, we had a lot of work being done separately, and we never had a way to aggregate all this information to provide better value, which was a huge technical challenge. And this is really what we're here to talk about, not so much the service, but more the product that we've built. And so ELA, as I say, ELA is a platform, and it's designed with a whole different bunch of use cases in mind. So we do have a whole bunch of products, which we're going to skim over.
Yeah, just going to quickly touch on this. I think people who have kind of read the description of the talk topic, we're going to focus on analytics and what it took to kind of create that agent to work on a Mac environment. But I thought it's always worth kind of touching on some of the applications that are within ELA. So ELA, being that sort of back-end platform that we're able to expand on and add a lot of value using some of the applications that have been specifically developed and things for Mac as well. First one to start with, I mean, really kind of straightforward for Cat24, and I did mention about Jigsaw being, a hardware business for quite a number of years. I think 31 years ago now. And Cat24, really kind of straightforward, is a logistics solution to help sort of manage rollouts and refreshes for new Mac and iOS sort of hardware. You know, becomes a bit of a tricky process in a remote world. How do you manage that? And that's kind of that solution. Elevate 24, which I'll focus on a little bit more because we're talking about it on our stand as well. So keen to get some questions and some feedback on this. But this was our kind of solution to privilege access management. I know a lot of people in the room probably quite familiar with things like SAP privileges, Jamf make me admin type scripts, and some other software and scripted processes that tend to be out there. And I think what we found is a lot of inconsistencies and not as reliable as we'd like it to be. So Bob and his team really kind of rewrote privilege access management as a native Swift application. So it's a offline capable MDM agnostic, doesn't matter whether you're online, what MDM you're using. It's a toolbar application that allows you to elevate your permissions, state your reasons and your time, and it will then demote that user after that time period with a couple of security features baked in. So killing terminal sessions, for example, because if you elevate as admin and you've got a terminal session open as sudo, I think most people in this room will know that that terminal session will stay as admin. So there's a couple really cool features in there. But again, how that's kind of made and created and works on Mac is using the native macOS tooling and native languages to kind of use that. So it's, in terms of the experience in using it, is seamless, really, really easy. Works with the next version of macOS, really straightforward, which is really nice. I mean, don't know whether you've got anything else to...
No, and I think I think for Elevate, obviously, there's a lot of use cases for it. So it's something, if you want to talk about it, come and speak to us on the stand is probably the best way. There's a huge customizable thing, or even just to touch on how we've gone about it rather than the actual product itself. You're more than welcome to come and chat to us.
Patch. Cool. Yeah, and patch 24, I mean, it kind of explains what it says, really. I think most people probably would have guessed what this one is. But it's basically patch management. So being able to provide a seamless end-user experience to patch management for application patches and also macOS updates. And one functionality I will mention around this, and obviously we spoke about ELA and the capabilities of the ELA platform, is and a hot topic at the moment, is MDM commands, everyone's favorite. But being able to automate and enforce macOS updates. So the application will actually notify the cloud and the ELA platform to send the API command to push the macOS updates rather than the agent on the device. So we can encrypt and store API credentials within our cloud platform, encrypted in AWS, so keeping them as secure as we possibly can, to then enforce macOS updates down to the device. And we've seen a lot more reliability, I would say, and a lot more success since 13.3 on that, since Apple have made the changes to OS software update. So definitely one that you can obviously explore within your own environments on that. But yeah, quite a nice little solution there. Again,
if you have issues with macOS software updates, we're not the people to speak to. I'm sure there's some Apple people here that would love to talk about it at length.
And yeah, dashboard, I mean, again, sort of really, really quick. Like I said, we're a managed service provider, how we can provide automation and efficiency to how we manage customers. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I can actually show you on the stand as well, or if you've got any questions about how some of this works. But building in automation into platforms to manage Jamf instances, Intune, Kanji, really kind of everything we've built is kind of MDM agnostic by design, rather than going down a specific route. So whether you've got your own, whether you create your own or whatever, the idea is that we can build on that quite easily. But a couple of nice features in there that I think it's always worth calling out. Subscriptions for applications. So you'll start to see a lot of harmony, I think, between these apps. Yeah. So them basically start to talk to each other. So what we're able to use is actually the patch data we get from patch 24 and actually use those packages and apply them to Jamf instances within policies. So everyone knows if you've got a Jamf instance, you've got to keep those packages up to date within policies. We've got an automation method to basically distribute the applications that we're packaging across into those policies to make sure that they're always kept up to date. One which I think is really cool, and then the other one, taking a privilege access management approach to things like Jamf as well. So just-in-time access, so you're able to go in, state your level of service desk, for example, so level 1, level 2, it will give you that access for a timed period.
Yeah.
So rather than have people having permanent accounts and opening maybe a bit of a security risk within certain sites, which is really cool, actually.
Yeah, it's a big challenge of managing multiple customers. As some people here will know, how do you control access and how do you stop having stale accounts on Jamf instances and other things like that. So that's been a real useful one for our service desk teams and for professional services as well.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think the main one that we're obviously here to kind of focus on is analytics. So Bob. Bob and his team have created and created the agent on the device to help collect hardware and software metrics, which we can then use this data for a lot of different purposes. I would pass over to obviously Bob to kind of go through and what it is and what it took to kind of build that agent, really.
Yeah. So I think this all started with a fairly standard problem that a lot of us have. MDM is great, but it gives you a snapshot of right now. What we were interested in looking at is how we can best support people over time. So looking for support issues or trying to be proactive in how we approach support rather than it just be somebody phoning up and waiting for us to we then have to troubleshoot it. What this has allowed us to do is have a nice view of a customer over time. So we can spot, if every Wednesday at 4 o'clock everybody has performance issues, we can see why. And we drill right down into the running processes at that point to try and see what could be causing it and try and reach out to people ahead of time if we can. Historical insight, I think 30 days seems to be the standard everyone uses, or maybe that's just in my world, but everybody seems to want 30 days of data. So we have that available, so you can see things, lots of different metrics from devices over 30 days to try and paint a picture of what's going on. So the agent, the next is a slightly generic picture for this one. We couldn't really decide the best way to represent it. So the agent itself is, it's again a native agent written in Swift. And what it does is it collects various metrics. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. I try to not collect PII for obvious reasons, security concerns and all that good stuff. We do collect serial number, we collect local IP address, but not your public one, just the internal one. The thinking with that was to be able to show metrics like if somebody phones up and says, oh, my machine's really slow, but they're connected to Wi-Fi, and last time they phoned up and said it was slow, they were connected to the same Wi-Fi, we can actually see that trend in the data. And that's, I think, where the insights come in for our support teams. We collect a whole bunch of stuff. Most of it you would expect, and some of it is a duplication of what some of the MDMs do. But as Liam mentioned a minute ago, one of our focuses is to be MDM agnostic. So if we have customers come to us with any MDM provider, we can try and provide as close to the same data for each customer as we would for somebody with, say, Jamf, which collects a huge amount of data. We do merge data, so we will take some data from MDM and some data from our own agent, and it really kind of depends which MDM. There's limitations of things. If some providers like Jamf obviously has smart groups, which makes life nice and easy to spot issues, whereas other MDMs don't have that, so we have to come up with a way to generate that data. And it's been a huge, interesting undertaking of exploring all of the available APIs inside macOS to try and get all of this data. As I mentioned, down to things like which network connections are active, what order they're in. That's an interesting troubleshooting step, isn't it? We'd go in and create a new network location. That used to be an old favorite. Whereas now we can actually see that the network stack at the time and what was connected and what wasn't. People connected to multiple networks, that kind of thing is useful. Battery health, all the kind of usual stuff you would expect, except we can collect it where the MDM can't. It's all done, one of the big issues I've seen with a lot of other tools that do this is it's not very transparent about what happens. A big thing I go on about all the time is how we want to be transparent with how we collect data, because for obvious reason, I'm sure everybody would be concerned if I just said, oh, I'm going to deploy an agent that collects loads of data from your machines. That's a worry, right? The way that we store the data on the device locally, you can actually go and see the data that's collected, and that's what's then sent to our back end to manage. We don't store too much either. That was one of the other complaints a lot of people had, that their disk's then full of these logs that are useless. This only stores about 50 meg worth of data before we just remove it and start again, because there's no need for the historic data on the device, because it's all shipped off to our back-end SIEM tool. The way we use the data, we do it in a whole bunch of different ways, and we'll come on to some of that in a little bit. If on the apps, you saw command 24. So we take data from the agent, we put it into our SIEM tool, but we also then use it for other tools. And that's where we come back to the ELA platform to try and bring everything together to make sense of using the data in sensible ways to provide different views for different people in the business and for different views for customers. So it is all fronted up to our customers. But for instance, Elevate can report not just to our SIEM tool, but to your own SIEM tool as well. One of the big things we added was CIS. Now, this is a little bit of well-trodden ground for CIS. I think every tool does this. But we wanted to be able to collect it in a more seamless manner for our data structure. And what you can see on screen here is actually one of the CIS rules that we use. So this is straight out of the agent itself. And one of the things we check for is enforcement type, which I've seen a few tools use, but not too many, where we don't just check that the setting is set, we check that it's set and it's enforced. And if it isn't enforced, we'll flag it. So you can see in the screenshot in behind here, I can't see that from here, sorry, but the screenshot here has some of the data shown as tick, but with a warning. And that means it is enforced, but it's maybe a user preference that's set. Or it's just switched on, the user's gone into system settings and switched it on. Doesn't mean it's actually enforced. So trying to highlight data like that gives us a nice sense of how we can best manage that risk with people, because obviously different people have different levels of risk they're willing to accept with CIS, depending on what angle you're coming at it from. The data that's collected here, so this is a screenshot from command 20, no it's not. What screenshot is this, Liam? This is command 24. This is command 24, cool. So this is a screenshot from command 24. So this would be available to an end user to be able to go and look at a device that has our agent installed and see the status of CIS. We also have dashboards to show this data in an overall view. This is just one machine. And the way that the rules are managed, it's all managed within the agent. And it's all the standard CIS rules. Again, I think everybody's been down this road at some point. So, but I think the user enforcement piece, or rather, the not enforced but enabled piece is quite an interesting one. We've seen quite an interesting set of data come out of our own estate, because I have a nice captive audience internally to test this stuff with. And it's been interesting to see the difference between, we're all good for CIS, and actually, we might not be tomorrow because a user can go and switch something off, which has been an interesting tell. The agent, I think everybody says this next sentence when they talk about their agent, is lightweight. It doesn't record data all the time. It actually talks to us twice a day, assuming you're connected to the internet. If you're not, it will offline the logs and send them later on. And it's just to cut down on network traffic from nobody wants continuous back and forth with us, so we do only collect periodically. Which is, it's been a useful exercise. We played with the timings a bit to try and get the data right, but I think this gives us a nice balanced timings for our data coming in. So this is the dashboard view in command 24. And it's again the same data used in different ways to try and represent what it is that's going on in these devices and try and give a nice overview of what's happening. And that's really what the agent's for. The agent's designed again in such a way that secure by design, secure code, all this all the usual development buzzwords that everybody likes to talk about, I think. But it is a fairly lightweight agent. You don't see a huge amount of utilization from it, because that's the other thing. A lot of these agents skew their own metrics, because they run, then they check your memory usage, but they're running, so they're doing 30 things at once. So we've not seen that issue, which is nice. And really, I think collecting data like this has been really, really useful for us, and I'd be interested in what everybody else thinks. I know a lot of people will have tools that do this maybe already, but I'd be really interested to see what your use cases are for it and see what else we can do to bolster this view and improve it, and maybe what your pain points are with the current ones, and see if we can come up with a middle ground between them.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to kind of see what you can kind of do beyond your typical provider. I mean, your typical MDM. I think most people in this room, or if not everybody, will have an MDM. Yeah. But the data, like Bob said, is pretty much static snapshot of that data when that inventory was run. So it's really interesting what you can do through development to kind of see that data over a length of time and actually change what data you want to see over a length of time as well.
Yeah, we've expanded beyond the kind of usual Mac management stuff. So for example, we've done software licensing. So software not used in the last X number of days to help try and cut down on licensing costs has been an interesting exercise. And that came from an internal request to do that piece of work. And we have access to that information from the devices, so we might as well check in on it and see if we can, what we can see from that. And that proved quite useful pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think that's the important part, isn't it? We're creating solutions for an organisation that has Jigsaw, I think, over 400, 500 Macs, and we're creating them for ourselves to kind of meet a lot of requirements. Yeah. It's like, well, actually, what can we do for customers of Jigsaw 24 as well, actually? Because, you know, if we get a lot of value out of it, a lot of other people might get a lot of value out of it as well. And we kind of test this on ourselves, really.
That's it. You know, as I said, I joked about the captive audience, but they kind of are. So
yeah, we are our own guinea pigs, almost.
Yeah, you know, I think these tools run on our devices. You know, our devices have the analytics agent. We have ELA ELA 24, and that's not unusual in the business. I'm not an admin on my laptop all the time, and you know, if I can deal with it, then so can anyone else. I think. I hope.
Famous last words.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and just to kind of wrap this all up, really, I mean, kind of the platform to kind of put it all together from a customer perspective. There's a lot we spoke about in terms of the applications that are developed, but actually how can we front a lot of this data up, and actually how can we be as transparent as possible, which I think is important.
Yeah.
And this isn't just from a managed service perspective either. You know, this could be applied from a customer perspective potentially. Actually, how can we view level 1 service desk? I don't want to get them trained up on my MDM. I don't want them access to certain things. And actually, we can tailor certain access and certain rights within a solution. So another solution with 24 on the end.
Yeah, we need to come up with some other names, I think. Everything's,
we're really good at coming up with names. Yeah. That's one thing, Good at making the platform, just not the name.
Yeah, the name.
But building the platform to kind of, like I said, to be as transparent as possible and front that data up. So actually, we've got this really nice agent. We've got this agent running on the devices. How do we make this data available? Because we've got that data reporting into our own SIEM, but we don't want to give people access to our SIEM. So actually, we want to use that data and front that data up on our ELA platform within an application that is titled Command 24 to kind of customers to see, essentially. I mean, and there's a couple of things there which is kind of listed off, and you'll kind of start to see everything kind of come together, which is the whole point of the ELA platform in the back end. So you can sort of see what is the possibility of you kind of own this development platform. You can kind of expand it and do with it what you want, almost, to kind of have solutions talk to each other. So, you know, prime example is patch 24 might be able to front packages up to the customer to be able to install applications through it. They'll be able to see the Elevate 24 data, being able to react on that, being able to react on MDM type commands and do automated remediation type at level activities. So you can sort of start to see a lot of the power that development and developing these sort of wider applications can bring to an environment, really, which is kind of the whole purpose of the conversation today.
Another big thing that we took a focus on, and part of the reason for the underlying platform, is that security is an issue. So something we see a lot of, obviously, is credentials we put down on devices to access MDM environments or access other tools. And we don't, all of these tools that we've spoken about don't need MDM credentials. We have them in the platform so that they are secure and they're never delivered to the end user device. So we can have a much better security response if something does go wrong, or if we see strange activity, we can deal with that quite quickly rather than have to worry about credentials that have been pushed down, which was a big focus. And it also lets us manage multiple MDMs. And that's one of the to your point earlier about the service desk, that's actually one of the issues we're starting to see, is we have multiple providers. But that can get very confusing as to one customer may have more than one provider now. So we don't want to end up in a situation where, you know, we've got specific agents for specific platforms. We can actually leverage these tools to help deliver that service in a much better way.
Yeah, it's a good point, because, you know, a lot of customers might have multiple Jamf instances, but a lot of customers now might have Jamf and Intune or Kanji, Intune, a bit of everything in some cases. So actually, how can we pull that data in and represent it in the same way, which can be a challenge, because obviously a lot of MDMs present their data in different ways, like you said, with smart groups, with Jamf.
Yeah.
Obviously, Kanji presents their data slightly differently, and Intune, again, slightly differently. So there's a lot of translation type activity on the back end to get that data presented in the same way.
Yeah.
It's been a nice challenge for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has been an interesting challenge, and I'd be interested to have discussions with people out there that maybe have a similar challenge, and we can maybe talk about how we've approached some of this. So part of the reason for showing this, obviously, is a product that Jigsaw have, but also I want to see what other people are doing and see if we can come up, share ideas and share technology. You know, I can't give you access to the code for it, but we can talk about it, because I think there's a lot to learn from this, and there's a lot to learn from the community about it, and it's something I really want to see what else we can come up with between us to make these products and your own work better as well.
Cool. I think that's lunch. Unless anyone's got any questions. I think everyone's hungry.
Yeah. Lunch.
So Heather, I've got some from the app. So I'm going to start with this one.
Cool.
Why not Dashboard 24 and Analytics 24?
Don't tell marketing. They've not noticed.
I kind of knew that one was going to come up, actually.
Yeah.
We just wanted some apps without the 24 on. Yeah, it probably would get added at some point.
Yeah, I think it will do.
Patch 24 didn't have 24 on the end, and then it actually got added last week, so never know.
That might be the prompt. So this might have been answered already, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How do you get the data from devices? Are you using API calls or more sophisticated methods like a client-based binary?
It is API calls, and part of the reason, well, internally in the app, it's a mixture of things. Obviously, we use as much of the native Swift and macOS APIs as we can to gather data. Not all of it's doable for various reasons, but in terms of talking to our backend, it is done over API. Part of the reason for that is often when you go into companies, especially in enterprise, opening ports for specific things becomes really tricky, whereas HTTPS is usually okay. At least we can whitelist URLs, and it's a much easier conversation. So there was a bit of debate about that. We may change it in the future, but for now it's just done over HTTPS.
And last one, I think. What data do you obtain from Elevate 24 which Jigsaw could use for their own purpose, e.g. product improvements?
What data would you consume? I wonder if the question, do we mean what data we collect in terms of metrics, or what data do we collect in terms of just feedback? For metrics, at the moment, it is just reason and time and username and serial number. The next version of Elevate will have more in it. We're going to explore the endpoint security framework to be able to provide much more detailed information as to what's being done when someone's elevated. That's going to be version 2 of Elevate 24.
Yeah, I think we're excited to explore the whole endpoint security framework, and it's something that Apple are pushing towards and want everyone to kind of adopt as that method of getting
It's been the most common request we've had for it, because it makes sense, right? Yeah. I think one of the challenges with that is how we represent that data back in a meaningful way to the end users or to the InfoSec teams or whoever might be consuming it is an interesting challenge. But once we start to get that data sorted out, we'll find a way to do that. In terms of product features, I mean, you can just email us, basically.
Email you?
Yeah, just email me. I'll forward it on to someone else, it's fine.
Okay, another one's popped in. Can you buy just one service, or do you need to purchase the whole package? It might be a plant.
Yeah, when we planted that. So no, there will be standalone, and that's kind of the purpose of the solution. Really, was that although they all kind of can integrate together, actually they are their own thing in their own right as well. We can just use a lot of the data to help benefit another platform, essentially. Yeah. So one thing that we're doing at the moment is actually launching Elevate 24 as a standalone application, for example, and you would have access to Ella, but only see your Elevate licensing and portal for data and those sort of activities, essentially, which is kind of how you designed it in mind, really, isn't it? Is being able to set it and set the permissions and the groups up. So actually, if people only need a specific access to a specific app, then we can do that really easily with all that in mind.
Thank you. Any from the floor before we? No, good. Thanks, guys.
Cool.
Well, thank you.